job, as described on the sheet that got sent to us all, was to take care of loose ends at the end. Everybody's already covered the important points, so let me just say a few things. First is, the moment really is right for action. Look, I've obviously been following this a long time, and in one way it's the most hopeful, and in the other the most depressing moment that we've been in. The depressing part's easy. The planet is really starting to implode in bad ways. To look at California and see the Sierra Nevada without any snow on it for the first time anyone's ever recorded. To look at the study that came out today indicating that with climate change proceeding unchecked, we can expect a 6,000% increase in the number of extreme heat events over the course of the century. To look at what's going on in the Arctic and the Antarctic and the acidifying oceans and on and on and on, is to understand that we're right now in these few years at an absolute hinge moment in the history of this planet. And it's too late to stop it altogether, but it's not too late, or at least the best science would indicate, perhaps to keep it from getting absolutely out of control. That's the depressing, hard truth. The really good truth is, for the first time in the 25 years that I've been working on this, there's a real chance of getting it under control for two reasons, really. One is the rise of this movement all over the world that finally is taking this on, and it really is an amazing movement. And man, you get some sense of how far it reaches when you see that today in Rome, the Vatican was talking in the strongest possible terms about all this. Its official kind of laying the groundwork for Francis's upcoming encyclical was talking about climate change as change on an almost unfathomable scale on this planet, and that is just the right kind of language to be using. People power, which in many ways began in Vermont, and there were people in this room who were on that march 7 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, up the west side of Vermont, where 1,000 of us walked up to Burlington, and at the time, that was the largest demonstration about climate change that had yet taken place in the United States. That is now swelled all over the world, and it's beautiful to see. There are people meeting in rooms like this in every corner of the planet tonight. The other reason that it's so hopeful is that we finally have a real alternative to fossil fuel. The fact that in the last 6 years the price of a solar panel has fallen 75% is this piece of new data in the system that is throwing every old assumption into question. More than half of the electric generating capacity installed around the planet last year was renewable for the first time in history. If we can speed that up, if we can accelerate it, if we can make it really work, then we've got an outside fighting chance. That's why the divestment stuff is so important right now, because it is one of the most effective monkey wrenches we can throw into the fossil fuel industry, who are the reason that it has taken so long to get anywhere. It's not because the science hasn't been clear, and it's not because we don't, as I say, have alternatives. It's because we have an active, powerful resistance to change that comes from the richest industry on earth. And that's why, just as with apartheid 30 years ago, we need this dramatic step of divestment to weaken their power. The one place I'll disagree with people on the panel is the idea that Vermont has the capacity to lead here. Vermont's no longer in a position, sadly, to lead. We did our best to give Beth Pierce and the legislature and the governor that chance when we sort of started this drive 3 years ago. But at this point, I mean, the fact that the Rockefellers have divested from fossil fuel and the state of Vermont hasn't is an upside-down world. Okay? It is, we're at risk of becoming, not at risk of being a leader, we're at risk of being an embarrassment. Prince Charles announced yesterday that he had divested from fossil fuels. Okay, when you have the sort of slightly jug-eared monarch class, divesting, then it is time for Vermont to do the right thing. And I'm going to just speak completely frankly here for a minute. You know, I'm not a Vermont native. I came from the Adirondacks here. The Adirondacks is wild and woolly territory. We tend not to be quite as polite as people in Vermont. Okay, so I would just say it's ridiculous that this hasn't happened already in Vermont. As with too many other issues, our leaders have been playing games with it. Peter Shumlin has said one day that he's for it, the next day that he's not sure, the next day that it's not the most important thing, and then the next day for it again. The treasurer has been, now I'll try to be polite, has presented a series of sham arguments that do not hold up. The one piece of paper that she clings to, this MEPC study, has been demonstrated time and again to be wrong. Among other things, it took the wrong class of stocks, not even the 200 that we were talking about. When you do the stocks that everyone else in the rest of the world has been divesting from, it's clear that Vermont would have been far better off to divest. Beth Pierce has cost the workers of this state large amounts of money in their pension fund. Okay? The Board of Trustees of the University of Vermont, appointed in part by the governor, has cost students at UVM large amounts of money that they should have had for more scholarships and more professors and more sort of things. It's one of these rare cases where one gets to do well by doing good. You know, we honor people who make great sacrifices in the name of doing the right thing. In this case, we're asking people to make money by doing the right thing. I'm so glad to see, my eyes aren't very good enough to make out in the back of the room, Anthony Polina, who has been stand-up on this from the beginning. River neighbor Willem Jewett from the House, who has been just tenacious and, among other things, did his best to get the treasurer here tonight, I think, to talk with us, but with no luck. The idea that we should instead engage in something called engagement with this industry is simply wrong. There are many times when that's just the right thing to do. And in fact, Treasurer Pierce proved that it was there many times when it's the right thing to do with this. She put out her press release yesterday, perhaps in preparation for this evening's event, when she talked about how she persuaded the Krispy Kreme donut company to stop using the wrong kind of palm oil in their donuts. Okay? That's exactly the sort of place where shareholder engagement works, because Krispy Kreme donuts is not in the palm oil industry, they're in the donut industry, okay? And so it's a marginal part of their business, and we can push on those sort of things and get change. If Apple's not paying the folks who make its iPhones enough, we can talk about pressure on them and boycotts and things, and eventually they get the message and they raise the pay of their workers and the cost of an iPhone goes up $1 and everybody's okay. That's not the case with fossil fuels. What we need to have happen is for them to leave 80% of their reserves in the ground, as Beth pointed out, and what we need for them to do is stop exploring for more of this stuff. We already have 5 times as much carbon in our coal and oil and gas reserves as anybody says we can possibly burn, and yet ExxonMobil spends $100 million every day looking for more, okay? That's crazy behavior, especially when you think about what $100 million could do in terms of putting up new solar panels every day, hither and yon. So the moment has come to do this, and the moment is, I have no idea why it's taking so long in Vermont for this to happen. I just came back from Harvard, which, you know, a week at Harvard where we were having this argument play out. Harvard's one of the few universities that just outright said, no, we're not going to do it. It didn't completely surprise me because Harvard is very slow about everything. It was in 1869 when its president said it would take some generations before it was clear whether it was a good idea to educate women or not. And he added that he hoped that Columbia or Yale might undertake the experiment, so that Harvard would find out. Well, at Harvard, happily, students, faculty, and alumni really came together. And since it was Harvard, some of the alumni were great. I mean, like Natalie Portman and stuff like that. People were I'm a little hunched over. It's because I spent much of the week sleeping in a sleeping bag in the flower bed outside the president's office, helping students who were blockading the thing. It was a remarkable scene, and it will reverberate, and if it doesn't win at Harvard, it will help in many other places. Even in the week that we were there, the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, one of the oldest and richest universities in Europe, and the place where the chemist Joseph Black discovered carbon dioxide 200 years ago, announced that it was divesting. This kind of stuff now happens almost every day someplace around the world, but it is time for Vermont to get in this and do it. If only to be able to hold its head up high. I don't really relish the thought of going and sleeping in the flower beds outside the Golden Dome, but I will if I have to, and I imagine there's other people out there who will do the same thing too. Thank you guys.